In the blistering heat of summer 1514, the Hungarian plains shimmered under the sun like molten glass. The land was dry, the soil cracked, and in the villages, hunger gnawed at bellies like a restless beast. The peasantry lived in perpetual misery, forced into endless labor by the nobility, taxed to the marrow, and punished brutally for even the smallest defiance. They tilled fields they did not own, harvested crops they could never eat, and watched their children grow thin while the lords feasted. It was a life that bred resentment, and in 1514, resentment finally ignited into rebellion. At the center of this storm was György Dózsa, a man whose name would be burned into Hungarian memory not only for his leadership, but for the grotesque cruelty with which his enemies ended him. Dózsa was no ordinary peasant. He had once been a soldier, a man hardened by battles against the Ottomans, skilled with a sword, and possessed of a commanding presence. In the spring of that year, he was chosen to lead what was originally a crusade of peasants and lower-ranking soldiers against the invading Turks. But the crusade's purpose quickly shifted. Instead of marching to foreign battlefields, the peasants began to turn their weapons toward their own oppressors. They burned manor houses, destroyed noble estates, and executed landlords who had long bled them dry. The crusade had transformed into a full-scale clash revolt, and at its head, Dózsa became both a symbol of hope for the poor and a target of hatred for the elite. The rebellion spread like wildfire. Villages joined without hesitation, and the rebel army swelled to tens of thousands. Dózsa's men seized castles, toppled noble authority, and struck fear into the aristocracy. But the rebellion's fury was matched by the ferocity of the nobles' response. The king's forces, well-armed and disciplined, moved to crush the peasant army. At Temsver, the rebels made their final stand. The royal troops surrounded them, cutting off supplies and water. Hunger and exhaustion broke the spirit of many. When the final assault came, the rebels were slaughtered or captured in droves. Among the captives was György Dózsa. The nobles did not intend to give him a swift or clean death. For them, Dózsa's execution had to be a spectacle of warning so seared into the minds of the peasantry that no such revolt would ever rise again. They devised a punishment dripping with humiliation and pain, something that would strip away not just his life but the dignity he had commanded among his followers. He was to be made a mock king, crowned in agony, seated upon a throne not of honor, but of torment, and destroyed before the very people he had once led. The day of execution was a suffocating summer afternoon. The townspeople gathered in a great square, the air buzzing with anticipation and morbid curiosity. Word had spread of the extraordinary cruelty planned for the rebel leader, and both nobles and commoners pressed forward to see it. In the center stood the constructed throne, a heavy iron chair, its metal surface already gleaming with heat from the relentless sun. The executioners had coated it with tar and oil, ensuring it would burn and blister any flesh that touched it. The air reeked of scorched pitch and sweat, and the atmosphere trembled with a strange mingling of fear, hatred, and excitement. Dózsa was dragged into the square, chains clinking at his wrists and ankles. His once proud posture was bent from days of imprisonment and beatings, but his eyes still held a fierce, defiant spark. He was forced toward the throne, his bare feet blistering on the hot ground. Around him, jeers rose from the crowd, some from nobles who despised him, others from peasants who had been coerced or bribed into hating the man who had failed to free them. His guards shoved him down onto the iron seat, and a shudder passed through his body as the heat bit into his flesh. The tar clung to his skin, sticking and burning all at once. They placed a crown of red-hot iron upon his head. The smell of singed hair and skin drifted into the crowd. His face twisted in pain, but he did not scream. That, perhaps, infuriated his captors even more. A heated scepter was shoved into his hand, searing his palm, as if to complete the grotesque parody of kingship. His enemies wanted the image to be unforgettable, a rebel king presiding over nothing but his own destruction. But the most horrifying part was yet to come. The nobles ordered several of Dasa's captured followers to be brought forward, men who had fought at his side, now broken by hunger, thirst, and terror. These men were promised their lives if they participated in the execution. Iron tongs and crude knives were thrust into their hands. Their task was to tear into the flesh of their leader while he still lived, to gnaw and bite at him like starving beasts. The symbolism was cruelly to liberate peasants devouring their own champion. Some hesitated, trembling, torn between loyalty and the will to survive. But the guards pushed them forward, and hunger overpowered hesitation. With a mixture of desperation and horror, they obeyed. The first bite tore a groan from Dasa's throat. The iron tongs ripped at his shoulder, tearing away strips of burned flesh. His body convulsed. But still, he tried to keep his voice steady. Witnesses claimed he even spoke to his tormentors, telling them not to be ashamed, that they were victims of the same corrupt system that was killing him. Whether those words were truly spoken or later imagined, they lingered in the accounts that survived. All the while, music played. Minstrels stood nearby, plucking strings and blowing pipes, as if the square were hosting a festival. The melody was cheerful, grotesquely at odds with the screams and the stench of blood. The nobles laughed and conversed, treating the scene as both justice and entertainment. In this perverse theater, Dasa was not just executed, he was dismantled piece by piece, until the heat, the wounds, and the loss of blood finally dragged him into darkness. When he died, they left his body slumped upon the iron throne, his burned crown still fused to his skull. The crowd eventually dispersed, but the image remained etched in memory. To the nobles, it was a triumph, a crushing of rebellion so complete it would echo through generations. To the peasants, it was a nightmare, a warning of the price of defiance. Yet for some, it became something else entirely, a symbol of endurance, of a man who faced his death without surrendering his defiance entirely. The story of György Dózsa's revolt and execution has been retold for centuries, not only as a lesson in history, but as a chilling example of how power maintains itself through spectacle and terror. It was an execution designed to strip away dignity, to pit allies against each other, and to remind the oppressed that their unity could be broken by hunger, fear, and the promise of survival. In the end, the nobles may have killed the man, but they could not erase the legend. His name still carries the weight of rebellion, and the memory of that iron throne still sends shivers down the spine of history. If the story of Dasa's death shocks you, remember it is only one in a long, bloody history of punishments designed not just to kill, but to break the human spirit in the most public way possible. And here at Torture's Room, we dig deep into these forgotten and often hidden corners of history, revealing the grim truths that shaped our past. If you want to uncover more of these unsettling stories, ones that will haunt you long after you've heard them, make sure you stay with us, because what you've just heard is only the beginning of what history is capable of.